in the footsteps of the Prophet. Lesson from Life of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam by Tariq Ramadan. Chapter 1. Encounter with Sacred. Islamic monotheism has always stood in continuity with the sacred history of prophethood. From the beginning, the one God sent humankind prophets and messengers entrusted with the message, the reminder of His presence, His commands, His love, and His hope. From Adam, the first prophet, to Muhammad, the last messenger, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Muslim tradition recognizes and identifies with the whole cycle of prophethood, ranging from the most famous messengers, Abraham, Noah, Moses, Jesus, etc., to the lesser known, as well as others who remain unknown to us. The One has forever been accompanying us, His creation, from our beginnings to our end. This is the very meaning of Tawheed, the oneness of God, and of the Quranic formula that refers to humankind's destiny, as well as to that of each individual. To God we belong, and to Him we return. A lineage, a place. Of all messengers, the most important figure in the last prophet's lineage is undoubtedly Abraham. There were many reasons for this, but from the outset, the Quran points to its particular link with Abraham through the insistent and continuous expression of pure monotheism, of human consciousness adherence to divine project, of the heart's access to His recognition and to His peace through self-giving. This is the meaning of the word Islam, which is too often translated quickly by the mere idea of submission, but which also contains the twofold meaning of peace and wholehearted self-giving. Thus, a Muslim is a human being who throughout history and even before the last revelation has wished to attain God's peace through the wholehearted gift of him or herself to the being. In this sense, Abraham was the deep and exemplary expression of the Muslim. He, God, has chosen you and has imposed no difficulties on you in religion. It is the religion of your father Abraham. He has named you Muslims both before and in this revelation, so that the messenger may be a witness for you, the new Muslim community, and you may be witness for humankind. Along with this recognition of the One, the figure of Abraham stands out, most particularly among the line of prophets leading up to the messenger of Islam. For several other reasons, the book of Genesis, like the Quran, relates the story of Abraham's servant Hagar, who gave birth to his first child Ishmael in his old age. Sarah, Abraham's first wife, who in turn gave birth to Ishaq, asked her husband to send away his servant and her child. Abraham took Hagar and Ishmael away to a valley in Arabian Peninsula called Makkah, which Islamic tradition identifies as present-day Makkah. The Islamic account, like Genesis, relates the questioning, suffering, and prayers of Abraham and Hagar, who were compelled to experience exile and separation. In both the Muslim and Judeo-Christian traditions, this trial is recounted with the certainty and intimate comfort that the parents and child were carrying out a command from God, who will protect and bless Abraham's descendants, born of Hagar. To Abraham's invocations about his son, God answers in Genesis, "As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I will bless him, and I will make him a great nation." Then further on, when Hagar is helpless and without food and water, and God heard the voice of the child, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the child where he is. Arise, lift up the child, and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make him a great nation." As for Quran, it relates Abraham's prayer, "O my Lord, I have made some of my offspring dwell in a valley without cultivation, by your sacred house in order, O our Lord, that they may establish regular prayer. So fill the hearts of some among men with love towards them, and feed them with fruits, so that they may give thanks, O our Lord. Truly you know what we conceal and what we reveal, for nothing whatever is hidden from God, whether on earth or in heaven. Praise be to God, who has granted me in old age Ishmael and Ishaq, for truly my Lord is He, the hearer of prayer." On a purely factual level, the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is a descendant of Ishmael's children and is therefore part of the great nation announced by the scriptures. Abraham is hence his father in the primary sense, and Islamic tradition understands that the blessing of this father's prayer extends to his descendant, the last prophet, as well as to the place where he left Hagar and Ishmael, where, a few years later, he was to undergo the terrible trial of his son's sacrifice, and where he was finally to raise with him God's sacred house, the Kaaba. Quranic revelations recounts, and remember that Abraham was tried by his Lord with certain commands, which he fulfilled. God said, I will make you a guide for the people. Abraham said, and also for my offspring. God said, but my promise is not within the reach of evildoers. Remember, we made the house a place of assembly for men and women, and a place of safety, and take the station of Abraham as a place of prayer. And we covenanted with Abraham and Ismail that they should sanctify my house for those who go around it or use it as a retreat or bow or prostrate themselves there in prayer. And remember, Abraham said, my Lord, make this a city of peace and feed its people with fruits, such of them as believe in God and the last day. This is the millenary teaching of Islamic tradition. There is a God and a line of prophets whose central figure is Abraham, the archetype of the Muslim, the blood father of his lineage of Ismail leading up to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abraham and Ismail sanctified this place in Makkah by building God's house, Baitullah, with their own hands, and this is precisely where the last of God's messengers to humankind was born, Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who brought the message reminding people of the one of the prophets and of the sacred house, a God, a place, a prophet, the trial of faith, doubt, and trust. These simple facts alone illustrate the remarkable bond linking Muhammad's life to Abraham's sallallahu alaihi wasallam wa alaihi salam. Yet it is the spiritual lineage that even more clearly reveals the exceptional nature of this bond. The whole Abrahamic experience unveils the essential dimension of faith in the one Abraham, who is already very old and has only recently been blessed with a child, must undergo the trial of separation and abandonment, which will take Hagar and their child Ishmael very close to death. His faith is trust in God. He hears God's command, as does Hagar, and he answers it despite his suffering, never ceasing to invoke God and rely on him. Hagar questioned Abraham about reasons for such behavior. Finding it was God's command, she willingly submitted to it. She asked, then trusted, then accepted, and by doing so, she traced the steps of the profound, active acceptance of God's will. No question with one's mind, to understand with one's intelligence, and to submit with one's heart. In the course of those trials beyond his human grief, and in fact through a very nature of that grief, Abraham develops a relationship with God based on faithfulness, reconciliation, peace, and trust. God tries him, but is always speaking to him, inspiring him, and striving his path with signs that calm and reassure him. Several years after this abandonment in the desert, Abraham was to experience another trial. God asked him to sacrifice his firstborn son Ismail. This is how the Quran recounts the story. So we gave him, Abraham, the good news, the birth of a sweet-tempered son. When the son was old enough to walk with him, he said, O my son, I have seen in a dream that I offer you in sacrifice. Now see what you think. The son said, O my father, do as you are commanded. You will find me, if God so wills, one of the steadfast. So when they had both submitted to God, and he had laid him prostrate on his forehead, we called out to him, O Abraham, you have already fulfilled the dream. Thus indeed do we reward those who do right. For this was a clear trial, and we ransomed him with a momentous sacrifice, and we left for him among generations to come in later times peace and salutation to Abraham. The trial is a terrible one. For the sake of his love and faith in God, Abraham must sacrifice his son. Despite his fatherly love, the trial of faith is here expressed in this tension between the two lovers. Abraham confides in Ishmael, and it is his own son, the object of sacrifice, whose comforting words to his father are like a confirming sign. O my father, do as you are commanded. You will find me, if God so wills, one of the steadfast. As was the case a few years earlier with Hagar, Abraham finds in other signs that enable him to face the trial. Such signs, expressing the presence of the divine at the heart of the trial, have an essential role in the experience of faith and shape the mode of being with oneself and with God. When God causes his messenger to undergo a terrible trial, and at the same time associates that trial with signs of his presence and support the confirming words of his wife or child, a vision, a dream, an inspiration, etc. He educates Abraham in faith. Abraham doubts himself and his own strength and faith, But at the same time, the signs prevent him from doubting God. This teaches Abraham humility and recognition of the Creator. When Abraham is tempted by deep doubt about himself, his faith, and truth of what he hears and understands, the inspiration and confirmation of Hagar and Ismail, whom he loves but sacrifices in the name of divine love, enable him not to doubt God, His presence, and His goodness. Doubt about self is thus allied to deep trust in God. Indeed, trials of faith are never tragic in Islamic tradition. In this sense, the Quran's story of Abraham is basically different from the Bible's when it comes to experience of sacrifice. One can read in Genesis, "After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, 'Abraham,' and he said, 'Here I am.' God said, 'Take your son, your only son Ishaq, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering upon one of the mountains of which I shall tell you.' And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on the Isaac his son, and he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went both of them together. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, 'My father.' And he said, 'Here am I, my son.' Isaac said, 'Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?' Abraham said, 'God himself will provide the lamb for a burnt offering, my son.' So they went both of them together. Abraham must sacrifice his son, and here he experiences this trial in absolute solitude. To his son's direct question, 'Where is the lamb for a burnt offering?' Abraham answers epileptically. He alone answers God's call. This difference between the two accounts may seem slight, yet it has essential consequences for the very perception of faith, for the trial of faith, and for human beings' relation to God. A tragic experience. This tragic solitude of the human being facing the divine underlies the history of Western thought from Greek tragedy, with the central figure of rebel Prometheus facing the Olympian gods, to existentialist and modern Christian interpretations as exemplified in the works of Soren Kierkegaard. The recurrence of the theme of the tragic trial of solitary faith in Western theology and philosophy has linked this reflection to questions of doubt, rebellion, guilt, and forgiveness, and has thus naturally shaped the discourse on faith, trials, and mistakes. One should nevertheless be aware of apparent analogies. Indeed, the prophet stories, and in particular Abraham's, are recounted in apparently similar manner in the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traditions. Yet a closer study reveals that the accounts are different and do not always tell the same facts nor teach the same lessons. Hence, someone who enters the universe of Islam and strives to encounter and understand the Islamic sacred and its teaching should be asked to make the intellectual and pedagogical effort of casting away, for as long as this encounter lasts, the link she or he may have established between the experience of faith, trial, mistake, and the tragic dimension of existence. Quranic revelation tells the stories of the prophets, and in the course of this narration, it fashions in the Muslims' hearts a relationship to the transcendent that continually insists on the permanence of communication through signs, inspirations, and indeed the very intimate presence of the One, so beautifully expressed in this verse of the Quran. "If my servants ask you concerning me, I am indeed close to them. I respond the prayer of every supplicant when he or she calls on me." All the messengers have, like Ibrahim and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, experienced the trial of faith, and all have been, in the same manner, protected from themselves and their own doubts by God, His signs, and His word. Their suffering does not mean they made mistakes, nor does it reveal any tragic dimension of existence. It is more simply an initiation into humility, understood as a necessary stage in the experience of faith. Because Muhammad's life expressed the manifested and experienced essence of Islam's message. Getting to know the Prophet is privileged means of acceding to the spiritual universe of Islam. From his birth to his death, the messenger's experience, devoid of any human tragic dimension, allies the call of faith, trial among people, humility, and the quest for peace with the One.